The most terrifying interplanetary war in human history will ignite the exact second two worlds wake up and realize they are no longer the same species. Planets don't trigger rebellions. Angry, desperate people do. And once humanity scatters across the freezing void, even the most ironclad peace treaties will come with a brutal expiration date. Hollywood loves feeding us these clean, perfectly tidy space battles. You know the drill, Earth dramatically squaring off against Mars, or even blasting its own moon. Massive fleets clashing in flawless formations, while suspiciously tiny armies of just a few thousand troops somehow represent billions of citizens. It makes for mind-blowing blockbuster drama, but it completely fakes the terrifying reality of cosmic demographics, impossible logistics, and ruthless space politics. A genuine, catastrophic interplanetary war won't be decided by flashy laser beams or devastating railguns. It won't even matter if the blood is spilled in the cold vacuum of orbit or on a dusty alien battlefield. The true horror is defined by where these isolated humans live and who they actually consider to be part of their tribe. In the thrilling early days of space colonization, warfare will still be a purely Earth-driven nightmare, just with unimaginably higher stakes. The very first off-world clashes will just be violent extensions of our current toxic politics. Some rogue nation will ruthlessly shoot down a multi-billion-dollar satellite. Hackers will hijack a global navigation grid or fatally sabotage a lunar mining rig's life support. A superpower might accidentally smash a rival's orbital platform right out of the sky. These will be incredibly ugly, deadly disasters, but they will still be controlled by Earth. The soldiers bleeding and the taxpayers funding the chaos will all sleep under the exact same blue sky, even if their lethal toys are screaming above them at 8 kilometers per second. But a true apocalyptic interplanetary war demands something far more sinister. It requires two divided sides whose citizens no longer share the same home world. Two massive factions whose entire populations, booming industries, and terrifying military might are locked on completely different planets, distant moons, or massive orbital habitats. Once that breaking point is reached, we are no longer dealing with petty squabbles inside a single human race. We are staring down the barrel of rival, alien-like civilizations, both fiercely convinced they are the absolute rulers of the solar system. The very definition of a world is about to change forever. A world could be a massive planet like Earth or Mars, a frozen moon like Ganymede, a dwarf planet like Ceres, or even a claustrophobic cluster of metal habitats buried deep inside a hollowed-out asteroid, housing millions of souls. Just imagine a shocking future where the Jovian moons unite into an unstoppable, heavily armed federation. Picture ruthless Martian city-states threatening each other over terraforming rights, while the asteroid belt hides massive, heavily fortified underground cities carved straight into the rock. When the children born in the dark void grow up viewing Earth not as their motherland, but just a forgotten relic where their ancestors used to live, that is the exact moment you have the explosive ingredients for brutal interplanetary politics, and ultimately total interplanetary annihilation. The devastating reality of armed conflict is always a horrific tragedy, but taking that violence into the unforgiving vacuum of space will multiply the absolute terror. There are no safe zones when a single fractured dome or a shattered life support valve means instant, freezing death for thousands of innocent civilians. The brutal truth is that warfare is almost never the smart solution, yet history proves that rival factions will knowingly plunge into the abyss anyway, blinded by greed and power. When the ultimate space war finally erupts, it won't be a glorious adventure. It will be a desperate, suffocating fight for survival in the darkest, deadliest environment humanity has ever dared to conquer. History proves one terrifying truth about war. Even the most brilliant minds can plunge straight into absolute disaster. The ultimate unspoken rule of combat, a brutal reality that haunts the cold void of space just as fiercely as the blood-soaked dirt, is that absolutely anything can kill you. Consider this the ultimate law of destruction. Down on the ground, that means jagged rocks, heavy trucks, brutal terrain, or striking when the enemy dares to eat. Out in the cosmos, it means weaponized orbits, searing power beams, rigged asteroid mines, and the horrifying reality that a simple wrench hurled at orbital speeds will obliterate its target faster than a massive tank shell. Let this sink in. A harmless spaceship does not exist. The sheer speed of cosmic travel turns every single vessel into a catastrophic, planet-cracking bomb. In the brutal theater of space, wealth is a weapon. Your massive cities are weapons. Fuel depots, colossal mass drivers, and towering space elevators are all devastating weapons or prime targets waiting for the slaughter. Mind-bending distance breeds fear. Fear forges a ruthless identity. It twists how societies view survival, deciding exactly who lives, who dies, and why. This dark identity dictates whether rival worlds can forge a fragile peace, or if they mutate into bloodthirsty alien empires, where total annihilation suddenly feels like the only logical option left on the table. Forget the giant fleets and floating fortresses for a second. The true nightmare begins with escalation. That terrifying tipping point where desperate leaders either scramble to stop the apocalypse or secretly plot to land a devastating, unblockable knockout punch before the enemy even blinks. When we picture epic cosmic clashes between Earth and Mars, we imagine glorious, unified planets, fearless admirals launching massive armadas, and dramatic, heart-pounding speeches screaming for absolute victory or glorious death. But the shocking truth: real military commanders spend their lives sweating in the shadows, desperately trying to stop the galaxy from burning, while secretly ensuring that if all hell breaks loose, their enemies are the ones caught completely blind and defenseless. It is a nerve-wracking, high-stakes game of cosmic Russian roulette, disguised as endless waiting. Escalation is the ultimate battlefield, long before a single shot is fired. Sci-fi movies completely ignore this terrifying phase. It is a toxic maze of vicious lies, panicked midnight calls, completely botched intelligence, and desperate diplomats begging for a loophole to stop a bloodbath without looking weak. Spies and envoys walk a razor's edge, desperately trying to prove their absolute loyalty while screaming warnings at their oblivious leaders. Ignoring these frantic whispers from the dark is a guaranteed death sentence, but blindly trusting them is just as suicidal. History is packed with double agents who lost their minds or sold out their entire species. Untangling this web of cosmic deceit is so agonizingly complex. It feels infinitely easier to just unleash the warships and let the ashes settle the politics. But the brutal reality: cutthroat politics alone decides if those massive fleets ever launch. There is a chilling, ruthless theory out there. If a galactic war is truly unavoidable, you must strike first. Strike with absolute fury, and obliterate the enemy in a devastating surprise attack. It is the darkest, most thrilling trope in every epic space saga ever told. Sure, throwing ethics out the airlock sounds like a ruthless master plan. But here is the fatal flaw: it blindly assumes only two sides exist. It pretends nobody else will react, ignoring the terrifying reality of third parties and cutthroat internal rivals. It treats victory like a simple light switch, where one side lives and the other is instantly wiped out. But none of these naive assumptions will survive in a highly advanced interplanetary civilization. It is incredibly foolish to think the solar system would just be a unified Earth battling a unified Mars. The terrifying truth is you would have fiercely divided nations on both planets. Add in dozens, if not hundreds or thousands, of rogue factions and minor players bordering the ultimate battlefield, both metaphorically and literally. In a chaotic solar system packed with rival powers, shady neutrals, and bitter partners, launching a preemptive extermination strike is not a genius masterstroke. It is a massive, catastrophic recruitment drive for your worst enemies. This exposes the absolute golden rule of space warfare: never turn your friends into deadly enemies, and never do your enemies recruiting for them. Picture a solar system packed with fragile glass habitats and critical shared infrastructure. If you casually obliterate a civilian space station, you are not just crippling your main opponent. You are blasting a storm of lethal high-speed debris right into your neighbor's orbit. You are destroying vital trade routes and proving to every terrified bystander that their lives mean absolutely nothing to your brutal war machine. You might win that single bloody battle, but you will instantly lose every ally you have. And that is a devastatingly bad trade. Even basic biology has its own built-in escalation control. Most wild animals refuse to fight to the death if they can escape it. No tiny patch of dirt is worth a crippling injury that guarantees a slow, agonizing death later on. The shocking exception to this rule, of course, is the bizarre number of creatures that willingly die just to pass on their genes. And these wild exceptions are exactly what brilliant military strategists must obsess over. Why? Because the enemy is cunning, ruthless, and will absolutely exploit any loophole they can find. Intimidating threat displays exist for a very good reason, and this exact same cutthroat logic applies perfectly to politics. When two massive factions realize a full-scale war will annihilate absolutely everyone, they will desperately hunt for loopholes. They will use brutal pressure tactics, proxy wars, and limited skirmishes before ever risking a total apocalyptic wipeout. Looking at historical conflicts across the globe, these brutal rules of engagement have always applied. But it is a massive trap to focus too heavily on just one single event, like the Second World War, to understand the true laws of warfare. The terrifying reality is that the rules of war constantly mutate, yet the underlying savagery remains exactly the same. This dark truth will absolutely dominate our future. And this is exactly where the gritty, horrifying reality of interplanetary war violently collides with the fairy tales of modern science fiction. So many stories paint a completely false picture, ignoring how real, ruthless organizations actually handle extreme risk and terrifying escalation. They dream up these neat, tidy little wars where two honorable players just blast away at each other until one side is finally dead. But real wars are sprawling, toxic political nightmares. They are infested with third and fourth parties and filled with opportunistic allies who will happily stab you in the back and steal your power the second you show a hint of weakness. In reality, a so-called clean, decisive strike meant to send a powerful message will instantly spawn 3 new catastrophic political disasters for every single problem it supposedly solves. And in the unforgiving void of space, that deadly ratio is going to be infinitely worse. One careless move in the fragile, cold vacuum of space won't just cause damage, it will trigger absolute, terrifying extinction. When a galactic war finally erupts, the battlefield is beyond your wildest nightmares. It starts with brutal, lightning-fast strikes, desperate, high-stakes gambles designed to instantly shatter the enemy's odds of survival. From there, it either drags into a soul-crushing stalemate or explodes into a bloodthirsty frenzy where the only goal is watching your enemy burn. But forget what movies taught you. The first apocalyptic clashes between worlds won't be fought with dramatic point-blank broadsides. They will be ruthless games of geometry, probability, and mind-bending deception. There is zero stealth in space. You will always see the killer fleet coming. You might think this creates a perfectly fair, chess-like battlefield where everyone knows everything. But you would be dead wrong. Chess is actually a terrible analogy for brutal space combat, and poker isn't much better when billions of lives are on the line. The ultimate secret? You don't need to turn invisible. You just need to violently scramble the enemy's sensors and make their targeting systems completely useless. Ambiguity is your deadliest weapon. Across mind-boggling interplanetary distances, fleets will unleash absolute hell long before they can even clearly see their targets. If you have thousands of kinetic slugs, the ruthless math of space war demands you fire everything you have, immediately. Hesitate for a second, and you will be ground into cosmic dust while flying straight into a relentless storm of enemy fire. Sure, fuel and ammo are strictly limited. But when a single hit means catastrophic destruction, you fire even if you have a massive 99% chance of missing. Why? Because you have thousands of ship-killing missiles ready to launch. Emptying your entire arsenal just to obliterate one massive enemy dreadnought is a spectacular victory. Restocking missiles is infinitely cheaper than replacing a billion-dollar warship and its doomed crew. It proves the most terrifying rule of war. Overwhelming quantity has a devastating quality all its own. The shocking reality? You might have to launch thousands of missiles just to sneak one through. Defenders use tiny interceptors to shred incoming slugs, waiting until the very last, terrifying second to unleash hyper-accurate defensive fire. But here is a mind-blowing trick, the legendary Whipple, or thin shield tactic. A warship launches a massive, wafer-thin sheet of foil right in front of its deadly missile swarm, pushing it forward using the radiant pressure of a blinding laser beam. To terrified enemy sensors, this sheet becomes an impenetrable, shimmering curtain. Lasers violently scatter. Radar pulses bounce back as chaotic garbage. LiDAR systems completely glitch out. When that shield inevitably rips apart, whether from space debris or panicked enemy fire, their screens are flooded with a chaotic, blinding cloud of shrapnel instead of tracking your actual launch point. Lurking inside that digital nightmare are your real projectiles, now terrifyingly close, moving as one unstoppable wave of death. The enemy's window to survive instantly shrinks, making your missiles almost impossible to shoot down. It is the ultimate space-age smokescreen, a brilliant deceptive tactic that turns the void into a deadly trap. Hiding a devastating knockout punch behind a wall of fake signatures is one of the oldest, most brutal tricks in military history. But make no mistake, the enemy won't just surrender because you blinded their sensors. Suddenly, they unleash mind-blowing countermeasures. Imagine scattering ultralight sensor drones at insane angles, dodging the deadly line of fire just to spy on you from the shadows. 3 drones from 3 blind spots instantly shatter the illusion of safety. Now the deadly game explodes. Fuel is incredibly precious, so you start chaining these sensors together, whipping them out on massive, terrifying tethers. A single tiny package violently stretches across miles of empty void, jerking and dancing wildly as the tension violently snaps. Your enemy is left totally panicked, desperately guessing which dot is a trap, which is a spy, and how to blast something that moves like a ghost. Forget everything you know about epic fleet battles. The terrifying war zone morphs into a chaotic, shifting storm of probability, pulsing blobs of pure guesswork that violently expand and collapse in the blink of an eye. Inside a real heart-pounding space war room, nobody is staring at a neat, shiny sci-fi screen. They are sweating over terrifying clouds of chance, overlapping zones of death, and agonizingly delayed data. No commander is lining up ships for a heroic broadside. They are frantically guessing, where exactly will that killer carrier strike in 3 hours if they hoard their fuel? And what if they burn just a fraction more Delta V to violently dodge out of nowhere? This is a brutally cold, unforgiving nightmare compared to romantic naval clashes. All the while, the absolute golden rule of combat screams in the background. Do not get hit. Make the enemy die for you. Heavy armor matters. Point defense matters. But above absolutely everything else, never being where they think you are is survival. And the power to dodge, the ability to violently shift, is always paid in blood and fuel. The void between planets is never a simple straight line. Travel is a terrifying, twisting path dictated by crushing orbital gravity and extreme velocity. That makes it practically impossible to build a traditional fortress. There is no magical front line to hide behind in space. But you also cannot just blindly blast past the enemy's brutal defenses at absolute maximum thrust. Double your speed, and any random rock, deadly sabot, or hidden mine will smash into you with 4 times the explosive kinetic fury. Plus, you have literally half the time to panic and dodge. Every drop of fuel you burn rushing into the kill zone is fuel you desperately need to fight or flee once all hell breaks loose. To make it a total nightmare, your vital reinforcements must take a completely different path. They will face another monstrous star fortress, heavily guarding the orbital lanes, absolutely packed with nukes and crushing 10-meter-thick armor. This means shocking lightning strikes are incredibly rare. Instead, brutal interplanetary wars will look like a slow, agonizingly methodical crawl. You violently conquer one depot, lock it down, patch it up, and push to the next. You are constantly terrified of running dry on fuel, or the enemy launching a devastating ambush to sever your lifelines. This is where the ancient brutal truth that logistics wins or loses empires becomes the absolute ultimate law of space combat. Delta V is the ultimate currency of survival. And raw propellant is exactly how you print that money. Down on Earth, a desperate soldier can scavenge, loot local supplies, or siphon gas from a captured enemy tank. In the cold void of space, there is absolutely no living off the land, unless you have already built a massive empire to do it. But if you control a massive chain of depots circling the sun, harvesting lunar ice, toxic Venusian nitrogen, Martian carbon dioxide, or even captured comets, you can unleash unstoppable fleets and dominate the galaxy. Launching a massive space fleet is a terrifying one-way death sentence. Once those thrusters ignite, there is absolutely zero turning back. A commander locking in an orbit is literally just firing a colossal, unstoppable bullet into the dark. The second that engine cuts out, human control is dead. From that exact moment, cold, ruthless gravity and raw inertia take total command of your fate. Now, let's expose the shocking truth about the asteroid belt, the ultimate sci-fi battleground. Hollywood feeds us this insane lie of a chaotic, dense maze of tumbling rocks, with starfighters dodging and weaving like fighter pilots in a deadly canyon. But the mind-blowing reality, it's the exact opposite. These rocks are unbelievably isolated. If you stood on one asteroid, you'd be staring into a terrifyingly empty black void. You couldn't even see the next rock if you tried. The belt is a massive dead wasteland. But brace yourself, because when the first brutal interplanetary war finally erupts, this wasteland will be swarming with human life. Forget those fragile, pathetic glass domes. Real space colonies will be massive, impenetrable fortresses brutally carved deep inside solid rock. Imagine colossal, spinning metal cylinders buried under miles of crushed stone. The only vulnerable targets. The fragile ports, solar grids, and glowing radiators sticking out of the surface. And they'll be rigged to instantly retract, hiding away while backup systems violently punch through the crust to take their place. Don't picture shining skyscrapers. Think of a heavily armored underground ant colony armed with spaceports. These exposed systems are the absolute lifeblood of the colony. Power, heat control, and comms all depend on them. When all-out war explodes in the belt, attackers won't waste time on the buried bunkers. They will ruthlessly obliterate the lifelines, vaporize a solar farm, and thousands instantly starve. Shred their cooling radiators, and you trigger a horrific boiling nightmare as their own nuclear reactors cook them alive. Slice their power tethers, and their entire economy violently collapses. It is a silent, absolutely chilling way to wage war. One single devastating strike could condemn 100,000 souls to a slow, agonizing death in the dark. Plus, blowing an entire habitat to cosmic dust isn't just pure evil, it's incredibly stupid. You'd instantly turn the whole solar system against you, and the shattered debris would become a lethal, high-speed meat grinder for everyone, including your own fleet. If your reckless attacks force the galaxy to dodge deadly shrapnel for decades, you will be hunted down as the ultimate supervillain. Sure, sometimes ruling by pure, unadulterated terror actually works. After all, your power to persuade is directly tied to the catastrophic firepower you can unleash. That's the brutal first rule of war. But making the entire universe fear you brings a terrifying set of new nightmares. So forget total annihilation. Future space wars will be all about ruthless, suffocating strangulation. You hijack massive ore shipments, blockade desperate tanker convoys, digitally hijack their robotic refineries, and mercilessly crush their lifelines until they beg for mercy. There is zero glory in this. It is cold-blooded, cutthroat accounting backed up by devastating orbital weapons. And shockingly, planets are the absolute worst targets for brute force destruction. Dropping giant meteors on Earth or Mars looks incredible in movies, but it's a spectacularly disastrous strategy. Planets are massive, layered, and virtually impossible to slaughter. Wiping out a city is easy. Erasing an entire civilization? Nearly impossible. You can scorch the surface to ash, but as long as furious armies lurk deep underground or in pitch-black oceans, orbital bombardment will only forge an unstoppable, bloodthirsty resistance. And mind-blowing future tech is about to make this nightmare infinitely worse. Imagine massive hidden bunkers where millions of civilians are thrown into deep cryo sleep. This chilling tactic freezes the population, saving precious food and oxygen while the apocalyptic nightmare rages on the surface. But beware, the deeper they bury themselves, the more endless and agonizing your war becomes. That violates the ultimate law of combat. Keep your battles shockingly fast and rare. You could incinerate a whole world, but who wants a dead, burning rock? Obliterate your enemy to dust, and you inherit absolutely nothing. This sounds incredibly dark, and it is. But the terrifying fragility of living in outer space forces extreme caution. When literally anything can be a lethal weapon, everyone shares a fatal vulnerability. So here is the brutal truth. Do not destroy yourself while winning. In the terrifying theater of space combat, relentless survival and logistics mean absolutely everything. You aren't just forging a massive superweapon. You are engineering a beast that must survive millions of miles from home, under crushing strain, with zero room for error. With survival hanging by a thread in these extreme environments, the reality of cosmic conflict becomes even more chilling. Let's continue. So, how will the very first catastrophic interplanetary war actually explode into reality? It won't kick off with a grand cinematic speech or a massive barrage of nuclear missiles. It starts in the shadows. A horrific mining disaster that whispers of dark sabotage. A vital cargo ship vanishing without a trace. A devastating system blackout that is way too perfect to be an accident. Then a single shot is fired, and suddenly the entire solar system is plunged into chaos. Ultimately, the first true space war will force us to face a deeply disturbing yet vital truth. A universe filled with delicate glass bubbles is too fragile for mindless conflict, which reveals the absolute ultimate rule of cosmic survival. Choose your battles very wisely. In a terrifying void where your only shield against the deadly vacuum is a few inches of cheap metal, the ultimate victory is the war you never start.